Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our idea exchange on big data and analytics. My name is Vijay Gurbatsani. I'm the director for the Center for Digital Transformation, and I couldn't be more delighted that all of you are here today. A little bit of a history lesson. We launched our center 2 years ago, almost to the day, March 1st, 2012, right in this very auditorium. And as I never stop saying, when we launched this center, it was on a dream. We didn't know whether anybody would even show up to our first event. And so we are really gratified that all of you are here today and kind of continue to support us with the enthusiasm that you do. So thank you all for your help. Thank you all for your support and your sponsorship. And we truly appreciate all that you do for us, manifested particularly in the interest that we have, that you display for the events that we do. So thank you very much. I have sort of a special announcement to make around this, because 2 years into this, when we launched, like I said, we didn't know where we would be in 2 years, just like any other startup. And with the support of my original team of Debbie Dunkel and Maureen Vasquez, who just left us last month, we got it to this point, and things have gone swimmingly well. And we're now ready to announce CDT 2.0. And so we are growing, and we're expanding, and we're really looking forward to the next phase of our growth. So I want to introduce my new executive director, Tim Stanley. Those of you who've been in my class probably know him as well. I am personally extremely delighted to welcome Tim. Tim has an amazing background. He was SVP of IT and Innovation at Harris Entertainment. For those of you who've been in our MBA classes, you've all studied the Harris case on analytics, and Tim was very much part of that. And then he went on to Salesforce, where he was also an SVP, and it's a very illustrious and accomplished career. He got his start in the Air Force, and we just feel honored and privileged that he graciously agreed to help us, build the next version and grow the center out and really kind of become the center of influence that we hope to become. Our ambitions for this center are pretty amazing. We want to grow this to be a national and international center of repute. We want companies to look to us to be a source of expertise. We want students to look to us as a center of expertise around digital transformation. This is something that companies struggle with every single day. And we want to put UC Irvine and Mirage School on the map as being a national center of excellence in this arena. So we have very big ambitions for this center, and it is with your help and with the help of people like Tim. Leslie Fell is also our event organizer for IT Exchanges, and I want to introduce our new assistant director. So we're really growing. It's been fabulous. Megan Marburger is our new assistant director, and so we have a great team. I want to thank the folks from Oracle and KPN and Toyota, who are here to kind of help inform us, and KPMG, our sponsors. And Tim will do more formal acknowledgement, but I do want to acknowledge our sponsors, because we couldn't do it without all of you. So thank you again. And with that, let me turn the floor over to Tim.
Thank you again for coming. It is truly a pleasure to have a chance to take the reins and work through our Idea Exchange event, one of our signature events for the CDT on big data and analytics. A personal passion of mine is both a geek, techie, and a business person over many years. And my affiliation with UCI is now coming into its 5th year, as we'll be teaching our course on EDGE, which is about disruptive innovation, leadership, management in the digital age. And I think that is what these kinds of exchanges are about. These are intended to be really 3 things. One, to hopefully give you some aha, some insight as to kind of what's going on, some new ideas, some new thinking, also some practical, as I guess now an educator, but more importantly for most of my career, a practitioner. Really the idea is around best practices. How do real people like us in real companies and real jobs make these sort of transitions and technological and business model shifts happen? And then last is to make it interactive. And that's to give all of you a chance to engage with each other, which hopefully you get a chance to do outside, and with a great panel that we've got, as well as the rest of the staff and the team that we've been able to assemble. And we hope to be able to do many, many more of these, and we're very gracious and thankful that you've joined us. Let me just give you a couple of updates and insights around what's the CDT, where are we trying to head, and how this event will kind of work. And then we'll jump right into the action, and I'll encourage you guys to engage quickly. Big wordy slide that Vijay did an awesome job of sort of summarizing, but here's really the, I like that, huh? As a big data and analytics guy, I would generally prefer single picture, right? So the CDT is really desiring to become kind of this premier conduit for these kinds of discussions and interaction. As this transition occurs, we all live and breathe increasingly in a digital world, right? Many of you found out through LinkedIn or through different electronic channels about this meeting. We're going to encourage you to engage with us electronically, but more importantly, and you registered that way, almost every component of our lives, whether your Fitbit, as I'm wearing now, that kind of tracked the amount of steps you took here and how much walking around you did, to some digital health kind of activities, to the way we engage with our family, our friends, and certainly with our partners and collaborate with business partners. That's the world that we are increasingly now in. And as that shift occurs, that impacts us, our management ability, our leadership styles, the way we collaborate and communicate with our employees, our friends, our teams, our families, in pretty profound and different ways. So our goal is to really dig deeper into that, both from a research standpoint, which the university is world-class and famous in doing and driving that. Vijay and his team are really, I think, going to bring some great insights. But in addition to then help bringing some practical insight and knowledge to you, and to give you a chance to sort of share a lot. We'd love to see many of you up here leading and doing these facilitated discussions, and also take that into a set of content that we'll be creating. This is being videoed. We're increasingly make this available to you in snippets or in long form, and through a number of different online and digital channels that we'll do going forward. So that's our kind of vision and goal. Today we have really two key components. We run roundtables, or what I call CXOs. Today, largely CIOs. We're looking to move into now the Chief Digital Officer arena, CMOs, CEOs, and COOs. And then importantly, this idea exchange forum, where we bring practitioners, theorists, strategists, and educators together to really kind of talk about the art of the possible. We're very excited about what the CDT has already been able to become. We've got a tremendous amount of support from great companies here that are members of our roundtable group and sponsors of events like this and for the CDT broadly, and this is growing every day. If you want to talk more about how you might become engaged, it's not necessarily just a financial deal. From partnership, collaboration, and other things, we'd love to chat with you more about that. This particular event is something we started about a year and a half ago. We run two different idea exchanges now. One is what I call a vertical, which is around the transformation of digital healthcare, which is a profoundly interesting topic, I think, to all of us. So that's around an industry vertical, and we think there's more to be done in other industries and other areas. We're going to talk about one today, being automotive, which is pretty exciting. And then the other one is this horizontal platform that we've developed around big data and analytics, and what does that mean? So it can be from just a fundamental, how do you think about and work with all of this data that surrounds us from a traditional archival storefront, and all this new stuff that's being generated in all of these crazy new areas and channels, and how do you bring that to bear, again, for marketing, for collaboration, operational insight, for product development, for global kind of integration or collaboration. So these sponsors have been very integral into doing that. I'd like to certainly recognize KPMG for their support of this big data and analytics exchange, and thank you for hosting us, and hopefully many more to come. Here's the team, and I'm the guy with a little more hair on the left there, Vijay on your right. Megan and Leslie do a phenomenal job in pulling these events off. Any of you who ever run events, you know these are, you're sweating and got fingernail biting right up until the end. They do a phenomenal job. Hope you enjoyed yourself. We've added, and we'll continue to add each time, a couple of new little plot twists, which I'll talk about. Definitely our goal is to mix and mingle, so we did a little bit before. We're going to add that at the end of the session as well. And we'll also ask you to engage with us online. Debbie heads up not only our research here at the CDT, but she happens to be our most excellent audio-visual and computer guru as well. So you'll see her jumping up and down to help with that. I did want to give you a peekaboo at a couple of the new events that we have coming up. The CXO roundtables that we ran, we just completed one yesterday. You folks in the audience here, our CIO team, had a great session there. And we've got two new idea exchanges already on the docket. The next one, just walked in yesterday, will be May 14th, big data and analytics, but we'll have a very interesting topic more to come, but it'll be around digital marketing in general, and particularly this topic that many people are talking about, and few, frankly, do it incredibly well, which is called omni-channel, which is how do you bring together all of these different channels that you have, traditional, everything from direct mail to call centers and phone centers, all the way down to mobile communications from an inbound or outbound standpoint, whether it's customer support, marketing, collaboration, and the like. So that's kind of where we're heading with the next one. I think you'll find that particularly interesting and exciting, and we're working on our participants for that. And then our next digital healthcare one is tentatively, I think around the 5th of June, we're kind of locking in the date based on a pretty cool speaker that you'll see us promote and announce here very shortly, and so we encourage you to check that one out as well. One or two new plot twists. You'll see a piece of paper, two actually on your chair you picked up on the way into registration. Really, part of this whole deal is to get your feedback, your insights, your recommendations. Gosh, I saw this great person, or I really know this cool story that I think would just be perfect for this. Let us know. And we also want to hear about what you think. How did the team that we brought together for this one do? How was the topic? Did we hit the right depth or level or not? What things could we do to continuously improve it or get more digital or more real in practice? So for those of you who still like, or it's easier to live in the physical world, you got the paper versions of this. Please drop them out of your way. And we're definitely moving into the electronic world. So we've got a link up here. You can find the survey available that way. More fun and interesting, though, if we're going to talk about digital, we sort of need to live it a little bit, right? So Leslie has graciously been voluntold that she'll work the crowd tonight and take your questions in pretty much real time with little cards that we've given you. So feel free to scribble something down as it inspires you, as you hear somebody say something, something's kind of burning on your mind, grab it, wave your hand a little bit, she'll come around and collect it from you, and we'll make sure that we try to get to as many, if not all of those as we can, as quickly as possible. But to make it even more fun and interesting, why not try a little digital, right? So we've got everything up and running on our Twitter feeds and LinkedIn and all that. More to come, but we've now got it set up with, you can, of course, follow us and see updates throughout the session on our Twitter feed at UCI-CDT, but you can actually tweet us questions in real time. And if they're particularly good or insightful or particularly boring, I know these guys won't be, we'll take them in real time. Otherwise, we'll hit it right during the panel and you can handle it that way. And Megan will be tracking that in real time. In future ones, you'll actually see a wall up here that'll show real-time feeds of the questions and different comments that people have coming in. So that's kind of where we're headed. You can also keep in touch with us through a variety of other channels. We just launched our meetup group this week. In future events, you can also, for those of you who are meetup junkies or fans like myself, you'll see us out there, and that'll kind of keep you updated and let you know other activities and events going on, including some new ones. And last but not least, we'll finish up the night with a little coffee. I don't know if anybody brought anything extra to add to the coffee to make it more interesting. You can go somewhere else. We'll have a chance to then meet the speakers personally, which for me, over the years, going to these events, you hear something from them, from somebody else, and you'd love to catch up afterwards. We want to make that available to you. So they've agreed to hang around for a little bit, certainly chit-chat and make connections, and then we'll go from there. So, any questions on that front so far? Great, let's get rocking. So without further ado, the first part of our program is really around what's the big idea, what's the insight, what's kind of new and interesting, and how do you think about this very big and very deep topic of big data. And we could not find pretty much anybody better than Paul Sonderegger from this. He is, in fact, true work title, the Big Data Strategist for Oracle. Interestingly, also a longtime analyst for Forrester. And so thus, I have an 80% likelihood that this will be a really awesome presentation and discussion. For those of you who are Forrester followers, you know there's always that 80% certainty of just about anything that they say. And he's also a product guru and a strategist for a company called Endeca, which is a visualization and data analytics tool that's pretty powerful as well, and we'll probably hear a little bit about that. So I'm going to ask Paul to make a few remarks, kind of give you some interesting insights about what's going on in the world, the kinds of things that he sees as he travels the world and works with lots of different companies and customers doing this. And then we'll switch it up to our guests from the practitioner side from Toyota to really talk you through kind of the real world of what they're doing and seeing every day. Without further ado, Paul, thank you. Thank you, Tim. And I have an interesting background, if I recall, as in education, right? Here we are at the esteemed University of California, Irvine. You flew all the way in from Boston today.
It's true.
It wasn't because we had good weather, right? You were really excited to talk about big data and analytics.
I genuinely am excited to talk about big data and analytics. And it's the storytelling part that I really love, but this is because I'm an English major. So I'm not a computer science, I don't have a computer science background. Cannot possibly claim to be a data scientist because I can't do math. But mainly the thing that I'm really excited about is what all of this means. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what big data is, what it does, what it means, and try to take some of the mystery out of it. So let me just begin. I imagine most people here know Oracle. If you don't, Oracle is primarily a competitive sailing outfit with a technology, hardware, and software business on the side. So if you are in an undergrad program here, that is basically what Oracle does. Oracle makes at least one of everything in the software and hardware business. And the reason that matters is because the entire IT industry is in a once-in-a-generation shift right now. The software industry is driven by hardware changes. And you saw this move from mainframes to mini computers in the 1970s, minis to client-server to web architecture, which was arguably driven by networking hardware. And whenever you have one of these big hardware changes, the software changes dramatically. It develops new capabilities. Actually, developers give it new capabilities that were not possible before. And that means you can solve problems that you could not solve before. And that means some corner of the world gets better. And that's why big data matters. But there is right now a great deal of mystery about what big data is. If you get 4 CIOs into a room, you will get at least 6 opinions. And that's just in the first 10 minutes. You'll get 6 more 10 minutes later. So we'll take all of the mystery out of it right here, right now. I will tell you what big data is. Big data, first, is not a specific technology. It is not a specific solution. It is not even a special kind of data. Big data is a phenomenon. And the phenomenon is the datafication of everything. The capture and the use of more data in more daily activities. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I will tell you that datafication is not an Oracle term. It is a term that, to my knowledge, was first introduced, was mainly popularized in a book called, appropriately enough, Big Data, A Revolution in How We Think, Work, and Live, or something like that. But it's by Ken Cukier, C-U-K-I-E-R, who is the data editor at The Economist, and his co-author, a man named Victor Meyer-Schonberger. So Cukier, book's called Big Data. It is one of the single best things about big data on the market because the authors are not technologists. They could not care less what technology is. They expect that if there's money in big data, somebody like Oracle will try to make technology to make it all possible. These guys talk about datafication, and they have hit it right on the head. Datafication is the capture and the use of more data in more daily activities. And that is the whole shooting match. That is the whole story about what big data is. No mystery. The question, though, is, well then, what does it do? What happens when you datafy more of personal and civic and commercial life? What can you do at a larger scale that you could not do at a smaller one? And what will that mean? And that is what we're going to talk about here. Here, we're primarily going to focus on what it means for companies. Not what it means for governments, not necessarily what it means for citizens, but what Oracle really knows best, which is what does it mean for companies. So this datafication of everything is all around us. And Tim introduced you to a number of ways that you can datafy this meeting. You It used to be that you would have an opinion or thought about something you hear, say it, and then disappears into the ether. It's gone. But now, of course, it leaves a record. This is the deification of our thoughts and opinions. You may be aware that today Twitter handles 500 million tweets every single day. Now, that's nothing. Facebook users share 1 billion pieces of information with each other every 60 seconds. So this is the datafication of what we think about things, what we feel about them, and this data can be used for more finely targeting marketing campaigns. It can be used to inform product design. It has already revolutionized the way that movies are released and what it means to prepare for an opening weekend worldwide for a big blockbuster. So this is just the part of the datafication of personal life. There's also the datafication of things, and we're just at the very beginning of this. So there are places in the Netherlands, for example, that have put up smart streetlights. Streetlights that are full of sensors, and they turn on when they sense you coming, they turn off when there's no motion. We see things like the state of Michigan has decided to tag every single cow in the entire state at birth, creating a lifetime of data for every single head of cattle so that they can better respond to disease outbreaks when that occurs. The datafication of things, of course, also extends to Fitbits and personal devices. It extends to seismic readings on nuclear reactors. There's a whole world of devices which will have new behaviors, allowing us to tailor our use of scarce resources and maintain those facilities at lower cost. So that's the datafication of things. There's also the datafication of activities. Now, if you have any familiarity with large enterprises or large government agencies, actually, you know that they've been datafying activities for 40 years. That's what enterprise resource planning software, ERP software is all about. So CRM software, customer relationship management software is all about. But what's happening now is that the cost to datafy an activity has fallen so low that very, very small individual activities are now produce a data trail. So for example, the practice of raising small amounts of money in order to fund a pet project. This is what Kickstarter and Indiegogo do. And so these are platforms that allow people with a particular project, like creating a great pair of jeans for commuting to work on a bike, or lenses that pop onto an iPhone so you can have a fisheye lens or a good zoom lens. These platforms let people with these ideas raise money from lots of individual funders. Kickstarter has now raised over $1 billion in total in funding across 57,000 projects. This is the datafication of this small act of raising small amounts of money. Then some researchers took the data about who funds these projects at what rate and what they were saying about those projects on Twitter, and developed an algorithm that can predict whether a project on Kickstarter will be funded with nearly 80% accuracy. They can make that prediction within 4 hours. This is what datafication is all about. It's the capture of more data in more daily activities to be used in more daily activities. Okay, so this is the datafication of everything. There's a great opportunity here. This creates an abundant new resource, data, from which we can create new services, we can create new products, we can create new ways of working. This is wonderful. So what is the problem? The problem is that the world's ability to produce data has dramatically outstripped most organizations' ability to produce it. And so when we did a little survey with the Economist Intelligence Unit, sister company of The Economist, we found that only 12% of executives of large organizations feel they understand what data will mean to their companies over the next 3 years. So we have this great new abundance of this new resource. It holds great potential, but leaders in big companies feel like they don't really know what to do with it. They don't really know what it will mean to them. And so that raises a new question. And the new question for large companies is how to bring big data into the enterprise and make it useful. So you have to remember that a lot of the stories that we read about are about these new online consumer services that only exist in a datafied world. So things like Kickstarter, like Indiegogo, OpenTable, Yelp, take your favorite pick. A lot of those companies are building computing infrastructure on the internet computing stack from the ground up. Exxon can't do that. And Santander can't do that. And Citibank, Ford, all of these companies have to figure out how to deal with this new world of datafication in the context of running multi-tens of billion-dollar organizations where they've already invested hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in technology. A lot of it with Oracle. So, we have to help them figure this out. And what this means is looking at the impact of big data on analytics as we know it, and the impact big data has in creating new possibilities for new kinds of analyses done in new ways. So we're going to look at both of these things. So let's start with, okay, what does it mean for what already exists? So within large organizations, there are things called data warehouses. These are big stores of data, often about their own internal processes, primarily about their own internal processes, transactions, customer data, product data. This whole world is built on the relational database, which Oracle commercialized, and there are lots of other versions out there too. The relational database has an ironclad rule. The rule is you build the model first and then fill it with conforming data. Now this made all the sense in the world in the 1970s. It was a great idea. When the relational database was created, the processing resources were scarce, storage resources were scarce. This is the only thing that makes sense. You don't just keep around a bunch of data in some kind of random format and then work out what to do with it and how to do it later. You build the model first, and then you keep only the data that you know you want. This is what data warehouses and BI platforms and reports and stuff like that, and key performance indicators and all those kind of metrics in big companies. This is what they're based on. The effect big data will have on this world is that these data warehouses will get taller. They will have more rows of exactly the same stuff. So more transactions, more records of individual transactions. A lot of this data will arrive faster than it did before. And so these companies are going to need more processing power at lower total cost of ownership. This is a familiar problem. And this problem has been solved and with multiple generations of technology. Oracle can help you with this. IBM can help you with this. HP can help you with this. This is not an exotic problem. But this time, there is something else. And the something else is the opportunity to learn from this great diversity of new data before it's organized into a nice, neat model. The datafication of everything means that for any given company, there is more data about their processes, their products, their customers, their suppliers born outside the company than inside. And all of that data born outside the company just comes in whatever format the creators choose and changes whenever they decide it should change. This is immense diversity that enterprise IT departments do not deal with on a regular basis. This is the world where non-relational technologies excel. This is where you find Hadoop, it's where you find NoSQL, it's where you find discovery tools, and this is where the heat and light is in most of the conversation about big data, and justifiably so. Because here is where you take a great diversity of data, put it together before you know what model you care about, before you know exactly what questions you want to ask of it, in order to reduce the time, the cost, the effort of exploring it, of forming and testing new hypotheses. This is all about changing the business. This is all about taking the data exhaust, coming off of customer interactions, coming off of new devices that now have embedded Java, have embedded databases. There are about 12 databases in an average BMW. combining telemetry data with social media data, with service records, in order to find out how might you handle those incidents more effectively? How might you anticipate them better? How might you respond to the customer's experience better? And create new services, create new ways of working, perhaps even create new products. So the trick here is that you have two fundamentally different analytical environments. One is one where you build the model first. You organize the data to make it do something specific. That is the run-the-business analytical environment built on the relational database that we all know and some of us even love. Then there is this other analytical environment that is where you take a great variety of data and you take it as is to figure out what it can do for you before you know what model you should put it into. These two things are philosophically opposite, and the technology you use to execute them is also totally distinct. But the two are more powerful together than either alone. What we really have happening here is the same thing that happened with electricity. So if you go back to the early days of electricity, talking late 1800s, there was a standards war, a bitter standards war. And there were the advocates of AC, alternating current, which was Tesla and Westinghouse and their whole crew. And there were the advocates of DC, direct current, which was Edison and his whole crew. And there was a bitter standards war that included things like executing elephants publicly in order to prove that one guy's method of generating electricity was more dangerous than the other guy's method. It was awful, but the AC-DC wars did give us a great band. So we should all be thankful. But what ultimately happened was that it was not a choice of either or. What ultimately happened was both. So what you get now is alternating current is what comes out of the wall, it's what goes over high tension wires across the whole country, and direct current, DC, is at the heart of every battery that is in the heart of every mobile device. So every single day, all of us do this. We all benefit from direct current during the day, and then we plug it into the wall and benefit from alternating current at night. And if you take away either one, the world is poorer for it. The two together are more powerful than either alone. And that is exactly what's happening with big data in the real economy. So big data inside of oil companies, inside of financial services firms, inside of telecom operators, inside of manufacturers, what's happening, and frankly, inside of Facebook as well. Ken Rudy, who runs Facebook's analytics team, will tell you exactly the same story. That to really benefit from a datafied world, to have big data at work, you need both relational analytical technology, which excels at standardization and control, and non-relational analytical technology, which excels at forming and testing hypotheses. So, there's a lot of work that goes into making these two worlds collaborate, cooperate, relational and non-relational, and a lot of technology involved. But I have good news. Oracle can help you. I'm not going to talk about Oracle technology, I promise. So as I mentioned earlier, we make one of just about everything you could possibly imagine here, whether that's relational databases for a warehouse, even running on engineered systems that are dedicated machines for that. The big data appliance, which is a dedicated machine for running Cloudera's Hadoop, connectors that work together, BI platforms, discovery tools, whole 9 yards. But what really matters is what it would mean. What really matters is what it means to Capital One, what it means to Airbus when they have these two worlds, relational and non-relational, seamlessly deployed together. So let me touch on this just briefly. There are 4 kinds of business value that come from big data at work, that come from the relational and non-relational worlds working together. The first is fast answers to new questions. So remember, I mentioned that the relational world is this world where you build the model first, because you know what data you're going to care about, and you know what questions you're going to ask. The data first world is one where you pour the data in as is, and you figure out what you want to learn from it. You figure out what questions you want to ask of it. This first kind of business value is something that actually Rick and Mike from Toyota can tell you about with much greater authority than I can, because they have done it. And they've actually solved material problems at Toyota by getting fast answers to new questions. But suffice to say, this is about easy exploration on a great diversity of data, a great variety of data. Data whose structure you do not completely know. And part of what you have to do is explore that structure, find out what's even in it, what shape does it have, what is it made of, before you can even figure out what questions will be valid to ask of it. So that's the first one, fast answers to new questions. The second one is predict more and more accurately. There's a lot of talk about predictive analytics in big data. I'll tell you the dirty little secret of predictive analytics. Predictive analytics do not make big predictions. They make very, very small predictions, just little ones. Millions and millions of times over. So things like making a prediction about a slight modification in price for an add-on to a cruise package, for example. That is the kind of thing that our machine learning products will do with a great variety of data. Data from the website, data from customer profile, data from past transactions, relational and non-relational data together. But it's making these very small predictions. And most importantly, watching the efficacy of those predictions. So when they start to fall, the algorithm changes its own behavior. It learns what might, it makes a guess about what might be more effective, and learns if that is in fact the case. So that's the second kind, predictive analytics, and on a variety of data, not just data in the warehouse, but data from these great sources of diversity. The third one is a data reservoir. And this also is an idea that looms large in Cukier and Mayor Schoenberger's book. They make an excellent point of talking about the option value of data. And this is a tricky one. One of the strange things about data is that when you use it, it is not consumed. This is, economists call this a non-rivalrous good. That more than one person can use it simultaneously, and you yourself can use it for multiple things at once. The trick with that is that it may be that the secondary use of data you collected is more valuable than the original one you collected it for in the first place. So let me just give you a quick example. We were working with a bank, a very large bank, and the regulators came and gave them a new liquidity test. And so this was to find out, do you have the proper levels of liquidity, of capitalization, relative to your deposits? And this is a new test. The data required to answer the question is scattered across all of the branch offices from the different regional banks this large bank had acquired. That data is in 16 different systems. Some of it's mainframes, some of it's data warehouses, some of it's relational databases. It's a mess. And they have these really brittle extracts that keep breaking. So they have limited access to the data they need in order to answer the regulator's question. And so what they did was just did one big sweep of all this stuff and poured it into a Hadoop cluster. Because Hadoop does not care what structure the data has. You don't have to build the model first. It's a reservoir. It's like a bucket. And you pour in this great diversity of data, and it just sits there. And it's really, really cheap. So even though you don't know what you're going to do with it, with that data, it's cost effective to keep more of the stuff around. Okay, so then the bank takes an extract out of the Hadoop cluster, puts it into the model that runs on an Exadata machine in order to answer the regulator's questions. That's great. Where's the option value? Two kinds of option value they discovered. One is that they're now ready for when the regulator shows up and says, we have a new liquidity test because the last one was too easy. We know because you passed. And so here's the new one. That's one kind of option value. But the even bigger one is that the chief marketing officer found out what the CFO had put together with this reservoir and said, now we can do cross-customer, cross-product, cross-region profitability analysis, which we could never do before. A completely new purpose for that data. That's the option value. Fourth, last kind of value of big data work is accelerating data-driven action. This is about machine-to-machine communication. It's about heading off equipment failure before it even happens. And this is a big part of the Internet of Things. Okay, so that's the good stuff that you can get from big data at work. I want to leave you with just 3 ideas about creating a big data strategy. So this all sounds good. Got to do something. Where should you begin? Here is how to begin. So to build a big data strategy, the first thing to do is to think in terms of data market share. So it's easy to think in terms of customer market share. You kind of say, here's my total market. It's the total available market and what that value in aggregate is. What percentage of those customers do I have? That's the market share that I have. What you need to think about in the big data world is activity. Data generating activity. This is where data comes from. Data comes from actions in the world or in machines, but data comes from activity. So you want to look at your industry, start with your business, but don't be limited to your business. Start looking outside your 4 walls to see where are the value generating activities in my industry. And most importantly, where are ones that don't have computers in it yet? Can we build a mobile app to datafy that interaction? Can we build a device that will datafy that interaction? Can we make a modification to some kind of online app that we already have in order to start capturing data from that activity? This, of course, is what Google has done in capturing information about all the things that we happen to be interested in on a daily basis. So the first is to think about activity that generates data. What share of that activity do you have access to? The second is to create proprietary data assets. Now, this is one of the reasons why it's important to think about data market share, is because if you capture a bunch of customer interactions that generate crucial data about their interests, if you capture it, then you prevent your rivals, your competitors, from developing that data asset. But I mentioned earlier, today, because of the datafication of everything, there is more data about your products, your customers, your processes outside your 4 walls than in. And things like all the tweets about your products, you have access to them, so do your rivals. So how do you make that proprietary? Well, you bring in that third-party data that your rivals have access to as well, and mix it with proprietary data only you have, perhaps your customer profiles or your past transactions. What happens when you do that is that it's like pouring milk into a cup of coffee. It changes the whole drink. The data set that is available to your rivals that is mixed with a proprietary data set delivers a completely proprietary view. You now have a unique view on that market activity. Then, and this is the 301 course, this is the holy grail. You use data to make data. This is what every big data player exploits. Now, the best ones are still these online consumer services. And the best example is still Google. Google uses data, captures data about what we click on in the search results and what we don't click on in those search results to improve the results for the next person who searches on that term. So as they conduct an interaction with each of us, the data that comes off of that one interaction contributes to a proprietary data asset that improves the whole level of service they offer to everybody else. That is the key. Because at this point, you then kick up this big data flywheel. You're using data to make data, and you create a proprietary data asset that feeds algorithms only you have, because only you have the asset to work on. And that creates a competitive advantage that is very, very difficult to catch. The starting gun for doing this has gone off already for every industry in the real economy, not just online consumer services. And so this is the thing that I will leave you with. At Oracle, we do these big data events all over the world. We've been doing a bunch in North America. We just did a couple in Jakarta, Singapore, and Seoul. And I can tell you that the questions that come up from these events are exactly the same in Singapore, Jakarta, and Seoul as they are in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. Because of globalization, because of the very technology we're talking about here, this technology market is developing almost in lockstep worldwide. And that means that these ideas getting to a place in your healthcare network, electronic equipment distribution business. Getting to these ideas before your rivals do is critical. You're competing with everybody. Thanks very much.
That was awesome, and I love the insight, the big idea there. If I kind of heard the takeaway, and I think I would like to bring that to life a little bit with our next panelist, really going out and capturing this market share of data that's available out there. I think that's a pretty novel and interesting way to think about it. I think most of us from the business or technology world can sort of understand that component. The combining it with things we know versus the open stuff to create or add and make our own proprietary data out of that, powerful. But the most impactful piece is the last piece around using it. And I think those of us who don't always understand all the implications, or particularly some of these newer channels, social, some of the engineering or automotive or other data that comes off of all these product kind of insights, getting exposure and experience to that, to know sort of the art of the possible is really the key. And I think on that level, let me introduce our next panelists and the practitioners here. Got a little video running in the background to give a little insight as kind of what these guys do. Mike Burkes is the National Manager of Enterprise Information Management for Toyota Motor Sales out of Torrance, and he's joined by Rick Detwiler, who is the Enterprise Architect for all of their data and BI activities and insights. And gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to come up, I think, share a little bit of a case study, some of the interesting work and insights that you've done over many years. I would also share with you that both of them have been involved with Toyota since about 2000 and 2002, respectively, and a long career and history of working in data and analytics and BI before that, going all the way back to, I believe it was Edwards Air Force Base, right, and some spooky kinds of activity. And by the way, one of the entities, some of that data that Paul was alluding to that is most interesting and powerful is actually available through government, military, and things like that, and pulling some of that insight together and learning in and around from that is great. So Mike and Rick, if I can have you join us and share a little bit about Toyota's story, and then I'm going to ask Leslie to kind of walk around a little bit, gather some of your questions. They're going to share a little bit of an overview. We'll jump right into panel discussion and go from there. So without further ado, take it away, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Paul, thanks for that great definition and that speech. I always kind of eat Paul something that says good, but I have a prop. That's a good thing. I have a prop. So I'm going to pass this around. You can only touch it and hold it for about 15 seconds. If you know what it is, just pass it to the next person. It'll come up later. So we'll see. We'll see what we can do. Thank you. As was introduced, run the Business Intelligence and Enterprise Information Management Group. So responsible for all data across North America for Toyota. And Rick's my BI architect, runs a lot of the systems that we use for. So what is Toyota in North America? Quick slide just so you understand that we have Toyota Financial Services, Toyota Motor Engineering and Manufacturing, Toyota Motor Sales, which is where we're from down in Torrance, and then the Total Technical Center where we're doing a lot of the design work. All in all, we have about 200,000 employees. Those 200,000 employees have made us the #1 retail selling brand again last year, 2.23 million sold. You can read the slides. We build about 1.7 million of our vehicles here in the United States. So, what does that tell you? Gosh, let's look back. Great year. #1 retail brand, and everything looks rosy, right? We're still, Camry's still #1. We're still going great. We've just won the J.D. Powers Quality Award for Lexus. Things seem to be right on track. Kind of a metaphor, guess what? In 2007, we were in the same place. The rest of the world was suffering from a recession, and Toyota, the cash for clunkers, which I think was done by our government to kind of help the OEMs from the U.S., was one of the best booms for us. Our sales went through the roof. We couldn't look ahead because we were looking behind at everything that was so great about us. If you kind of look at Toyota and how Toyota came into the United States, it's a very interesting story. Toyota Pet Crown landed as our very first product. It couldn't back up. It didn't have enough power to back up the driveway of the Toyota dealership that was going to sell it. So they quickly replaced it with a Corona. And that was a very good seller. It actually kickstarted our start. And since then, we've grown. We've diversified into sports cars, trucks, you name it. The hybrids certainly have taken our name. But I guess the point here is our products have always been really out there on the leading edge. If you look at the Prius, we decided to build the Prius when gas was 99 cents a gallon. We sold 6 million of them so far, and it's the #1 Prius, or the #1 hybrid car in the world. And we're now going to launch. We're going to replace. We didn't jump on the electric bandwagon so much. This is the electric Prius, still on the hybrid technology. But the next bandwagon we're jumping on is the fuel cell. We have a fuel cell vehicle that we're going to start selling next year that can go 300 miles and it refuels in 2 minutes. And that's going to be phenomenal. It's going to cost about $30,000. So beware, folks that are buying battery-operated cars. Battery technology will come down in its time, and the prices will come, and the longevity of it. But I really think the fuel cell vehicle is going to be, the next big innovation for us. And it's, I guess, the biggest challenge is probably the infrastructure. Things change, right? We all know that things change. That's the one inevitable thing that we can all depend on. And thinking back to 2007, that was our best year ever. My bonus was huge that year. It was great, right? This killed us. I mean, we walked in 2008, and I tell you, there's a lot of pride from the people who work at Toyota, as there should be. It's a great company. This killed us. It's just hard to see yourself plastered all over the news, and you're questioning your friends, you're questioning, your company. You're like, are we hiding something? Did we do something wrong? What's going on? And then we're followed up by this statement, and now you start getting a little bit angry, right? Because here's someone, working on something that's saying, stop selling, don't drive the cars. So imagine if whatever business you're in, a government official went on television and said, stop using this product, it's dangerous, it could kill you. This generated a lot of passion in a lot of us. It really generated a lot of angst and really a thought, within IS that we had to do something. Yeah, we had to do something. Look what happened to us from an IS standpoint. You go from overnight, 1.2 million views on your website every day to 5.5. Your customer service call goes from 3,000 to 96,000. So now, we're just trotting along. We haven't looked at the future. We're trotting along, and all of a sudden, you've got 96,000 calls coming in. And you're putting people on hold that are pissed at you. And that, only makes the situation worse. Warranty claims, 116,623, because now we're bringing people in to check their cars, we're kind of in this panic mode. What are we going to do? Financial transactions, 1 million to 5.5 million. There's a good story to this, though. Those financial transactions used to take about 4.5 hours to process. When this happened, they were suddenly taking about 25 hours to process. Yes, they're on the mainframe. Yes, they're written largely in COBOL. So we pulled a whole bunch of IT people in the room, and we got the thing to run in 45 minutes. So there were some successes that we were coming out that weren't, around the big data, but there were so many challenges that we had to do. And again, just like the way going in front, when you see the president of your parent company, when you see the North American president in front of Congress, and Congress, I don't know if any of you watched that, Congress was not very nice to him. I wasn't at that second and that point in time very proud to be an American, because we were really just beating this company up. And I had pride in this company, and I knew that we were a good company, we were trying to do the right thing. And it was just really sad. I mean, we walked around for a very long time with a lot of emotion on our sleeves. What was happening is this was going through our CIO, brand new in the job. Can you imagine? Brand new in the job, he steps in the job, and 3 months later this hits. And I saw him do something that I've never seen before or since. I started working with Ben and Becca on a new discovery BI tool. I've listened, I've gone online and seen Paul speaking about how you could take unstructured data and structured data. And we were thinking, wow, this will probably be something that would be cool, because we knew social media was coming up, and there's a lot of social media stuff out there, and so we could actually probably pull some of this unstructured data from social media and see what it could do. So we started doing some of these little POCs with this Indecta tool that we bought, or that we were looking at. And when this hit, a group of us got in the room and said, how can we help? How can we help our business sift through what's being created? Because this data was coming in. And every time you take a car into a warranty service claim. You get a service claim, you get the response from the technician, what's happening on that claim. We download on the Lexus, it's 34 different systems on your vehicle. We download all that data. Very unstructured data, some of it free-form text, some of it structured about the vehicle, some of it sensor data. It's coming in all forms, and being a relational guy, what do we do with this? We were looking for different technologies. It was all around, the questions that were coming from Congress is, when did you know, what did you know, when did you decide what you were going to do about it? And so there was nobody in the company, and really looking through it, looking back, we know that there were people in the quality that were kind of going up through their chains, there were people in the sales that were kind of going up through their chains. There was probably not enough collaboration to help us understand the gravity potentially of what we were seeing and what we were hearing, but there wasn't anybody that was hiding anything. But when does that data become knowledge? How do you tie it all together and make it knowledge? How do you find the needle in the haystack? And I'll tell you how hard a quality problem is. I don't know where that little piece is. Has it made itself around? Does anybody know what it is? Okay, good. I'm glad you don't know what it is, because it's interesting that it's something that's so common to all of us could not know what it is. I'm going to give you an anecdote about a warranty claim. 2008 Camry, speedometer needle. Sometimes in hot weather, would stick. Little peg would it rest on when you turn the car off. You turn it back on, it would sometimes stick. It wouldn't go anywhere, right? So it would, when the car got going, eventually it would do it, but that's a quality issue. Right? Your data tells you this quality issue started right here. It started with vehicles that were built at this plant. It started with vehicles that were built at this day at this plant. So what do? So you go to the plant. What do you do in your practices? There's nothing in your practices that will tell you. But you can see, you can get some of these in, and that needle is sticky. You go to the manufacturer that builds that speedometer. Where'd you get your needles from? We get this from Joe's Needle Shop, right? So you go to the company that makes the spindles that the speedometer rests on. And you go in and you look from step 1 to step 20 and nothing has changed. And yet, for those cars, it was sticky. That piece of paper is a dryer sheet. Those parts came out of a press with rough edges on it. They throw those parts into a tumbler, just like you used to tumble rocks when you were a little kid. To make them shiny, you tumble them. Static electricity makes them stick together. Apparently, bounce dryer sheets in that not only takes care of the static, it doesn't leave a residue. They ran out of bounce sheets one night. Person goes to the store, buys a different brand. That's an ecological brand. That is, that has no smell, no anything, but it leaves a residue on tumbled pins that cause needles to stick. So I'm just saying, the data is always not right there in front of you. We can tell exactly everything, except for the guy that went and spent $1 instead of spending $1.50 or $2 and caused, some pretty significant problems. It's just, these are needles, and there's needles in everything we do in every business we do. So getting back to what we did, we actually took this tool and we said, let's go out and look at this database. And if you ever want to play with text analytics or you ever want to play with something, you can download the NHTSA database. And I hope you find the same thing that we did. It took about 6 hours to pull this data into this largely unstructured data, to pull it in and start looking at what stories it could tell. And the very first story that got me in front of Jim Lentz to say, look, we kind of have an issue here, was that we weren't being treated the same way that our other suppliers or other OEMs in the United States were being treated. And so then that anger kind of comes up, right? Because if you looked at Prius claims, because Prius is arguably the most recognized brand in the Toyota lineup, a person would call in and say, my Prius check engine light came on. And NHTSA would call them and they would say, yeah, one time my window didn't go down over here. And one time I heard a rattle in the door. And one time I couldn't get my seat to recline the way I wanted. And what we were seeing is for every Toyota vehicle, we were finding multiple claims. 5 or 6. We would look at other companies' cars and they would say, driving down the road, my rear axle rusted off, it fell out, and my car rolled into a ditch. one claim. So we're like, why are we being treated differently? So then that's where the anger gets in. But we saw this really quickly. I mean, it just popped out at us. It just popped out and said, look, here's what the data is telling us. So we said, what can we do if we start bringing in the proprietary data that we have? So that was the external data. What happens if we bring in the customer data, our parts data, our warranty, and our sales data? So in about 50 hours, we were able to pull together something that was clean enough to show senior executives and say, we need to invest in this. And I will tell you that this revelation happened on March 27th. Our fiscal year ends April 1st. Before April 1st, we made a multi-million-dollar investment in DECA in 3 days. In 3 days, the software was sitting there. That's what I'm saying. I've never seen a CIO do that. Just cut through the red tape and say, let's go do it. And Zach, I mean, I applaud him for the way he ran his department. And I think few CIOs could have reacted to the pressure that came up. And this was a great trust that he put into us. So I'm going to let Rick talk to you a little bit about it, and then I'll come back and say where we're going, but a little bit about what we were actually able to do.
I get to talk. I can do that because he's my boss. Anyhow, we continue to talk about it because the patterns for data usage and discovery are the same that you use in the Hadoop environment. Although it's much more accessible for the users to access this data, as opposed to being a statistician or somebody in a grad program that uses R for the So we have several applications. The top piece, 13 years of data, we have an application called National Service History. So over the years, when we have claims on our cars where somebody proposes a claim that something happened to the car, we know what happened in that car. That car talks to us. So we've learned through the data how to listen to that. We actually taught the language before we understood how to interpret that language. So we use the data discovery pieces and the big data pieces to interpret that data and make it accessible by our business partners. And what that's done is it's created engagement with our business partners that we hadn't had in years. So this application, the 13 years of data, we have national service history. It's nearly 1 billion rows of data in memory, and you can run any query that you can think of across this universe of data, and it returns in less than 10 seconds with answers. Now, what that means is it proves or disproves intuition from somebody that uses this application, that's been with the company 25 or 30 years, that they've been to the field, they service vehicles, they know what this product is supposed to be. And sometimes their intuitions prove out, and often they don't. But really, what this type of analysis does is it lets you see anomalies. And when you go through for the discovery piece, with this much data, we bring it in, and it lends itself naturally to it. You wouldn't take unstructured data and force it into that structured pipeline, because you distill some of the value out of that data universe. So what you want to create is the ability to drill down and focus on the user's intuition.
I think what's just important about this is, Akio Toyota from day one, told us, open the book, open the kimonos, as you say, and let's make sure that we're looking at our critical information. Let's make sure we're sharing it. So as a result, we created a vehicle lifecycle 360.
So we have, in addition to the national service history pieces, we have our warranty claims, we have our product quality. Product quality is what I was speaking to earlier, and it's been very impactful for the company. We also, I mentioned the incentives, right? So we understand what the national incentives program looks like, so we can maximize sales and profitability. Sometimes it's counterintuitive how we promote sales in specific regions, right? So this data is so voluminous that it's difficult to try to analyze it in any traditional, when I say traditional, I mean relational method, right? So it's like Paul said earlier, it becomes very tall and very non-functional whenever you bring those pieces. This data, when it comes in, it's a key value pair basis, and it's not structured, and it's best to keep it unstructured until you need it, and you logically bring it together, either through your Hadoop processes or through what's called an ingestion process into these tools. This is one of the screens from the product quality analysis, and what you have in the background is a huge data set that's in memory, and the boxes down the left side are termed as guided navigation, where you start with the entire universe and you just drill down into focus on a particular area that you're interested in. And the key there is focus, because our users are looking for something that they have suspicion. But until they can get that huge amount of data focused to something that they can see, it really doesn't tell the story. This tool helps them tell that story. We can bring in data without going in, I speak too technically sometimes, but without going through the entire process of relational, putting something into something relational, we can much quicker bring in large volumes or huge volumes of data into this type of tool, whether it's Hadoop or the embedded piece.
I think one of the things that was interesting, and the reason I put this slide up is because, you know, Rick talked about the distilling process. We would never see this in a relational database. This would be cleaned up in a relational database. This is a way that our business had characterized the different grades of our car. They all said the same thing. It's a standard, right? But we had chosen 14 different ways to say it in our enterprise relational data, or our enterprise data. And we left this as you know, something for me, because we've always been harping about data quality. Everybody, you know, the bosses think it's just easy, go buy a tool, put it on top of it, it's going to work, right? Well, we always are pundits of, no, you got to get the data right. So we left this. This was the one thing I said, hey, can I leave this, because nobody really cares about the grade of the car. We're not really differentiating our vehicles by their grade, because we use all numbers and Katashiki numbers and all types of other stuff to do it. So I left this out there, and this is just my data quality slide. So the nice thing about some of these tools is it does allow you to expose these, and you can start working on these, which we haven't prioritized to work on this yet as a business, so these are still out there. The good thing, and I have to put this in because the good side of the story is we brought in NASA, we brought in you know, a huge blue ribbon panel of experts to look at our systems, and you know, yes, we had a problem with aftermarket formats that were put on top of the regular formats and installed incorrectly, and unfortunately caused some accidents. We did have some sticky pedals that on 6 vehicles. There were 6 vehicles that had a pedal where it came back slowly, it didn't stick, but it would not pop back, maybe because of the dryer sheet that was wrong. Same kind of deal, so we did a huge recall. For that, you know, the thing we were finding out, many of you might have heard about the Prius in San Diego that was running out of control, had the police going. Probably can't say this, but the data showed the guy practicing the day before how he could put his foot on the brake and put his foot on the accelerator at the same time. So, but we're a nice company, so we're not going to go publicly and say that, right? So, yeah, I shouldn't say that. But that's what the data tells you, right? That's what they did. And I drove a Prius at the time, and I don't know if anybody, hopefully somebody drives a Prius, but I drove a Prius at the time. If you touch the brake, that car just stopped. So anyway, this was a good point, and then it even got better, because now Mr. Hood's our friend, and he told his daughter to buy one. So if Ray says it's okay, it's got to be okay. So
let's step back for a second. So using this new technology, when we went to NHTSA, the standard used to be they have a question, you come back up 3 weeks or a month later with an answer. And then we started rolling this tool out, and that month soon became a week. Right? So guess what? The new standard was a week. Please come back with an answer in a week. Right? So did that happen across the board? I'm not certain it did, but we successfully faced that, and we continue to do that.
But what it kind of helped us do is, from being now reactive, so now we're like, how do we become proactive, and how do we start using this data and this technology to do stuff? It's fun. So, as I said, we started out with a vehicle 360. Now let's, look into a customer 360. How can we take what we know on the inside, this is all of our proprietary data, and add it to stuff that's out there in the universe that everybody can get to, our competitors can get to. We can tell from our relational systems that a gentleman is a college degree, and he has a certain income level, you know where he lives, and you know what kind of cars he drives. Social media can actually tell us his occupation, or he likes to go and shop, eat, what his family looks like, if he has pets. I mean, just think of the marketing opportunities that open up when you start understanding all of this about your customer. So we went through, and you know, the funny part of this is how do you monetize this stuff? How do you put money on big data, right? Because you got to sell these investments. And so we went through a whole bunch of these. I thought this was relevant because it's not something that a lot of people aren't doing. There are some things that we wanted to share, or that we could share that are a little bit proprietary, but this is kind of open. So what we're thinking is, what if we looked at all this data to personalize your experience with the car? So TMS is the marketing place. You know, we get the customer to agree to share the vehicle usage data. Then we take that data and we look at it and we recommend tuning changes to the vehicle. We tell the dealerships what the customers are saying, how they're driving their cars, what we could potentially offer them as a market. The dealer offers those to the customer likes them, they buy them, we sell parts to the dealer. So everybody makes money and the customer's happy. That's just the thing. And this is what it kind of looks like. You know, look at Steve speaking to me. He has a 2011 Tacoma, and he's an avid wakeboard rider. We learned that on his social media. We even learned what kind of boat he has. We can do some analytics on that and say, wait a minute, he's got a car that's rated at 4,000 pounds, and he's towing a 5,000-pound boat. So we're not going to tell Steve he can't indulge in his passion, but we can look at his data coming across our telemetry systems and say, you know what, you got problems in your braking, your tow rate, in your engine load. So first thing we got to do is, you know, probably offer you a suggestion to go out and buy TRD brakes, the Toyota Racing Division brakes, because it'll help you with your stopping power, and we're obviously having that, we're seeing that in your vehicle. And oh, by the way, we're going to bombard you every time you go on the web and start showing you pictures of Tundras. And guess what? When you go to your shiny Toyota dealership to get your car fixed, there's going to be a Tundra waiting for you to test drive. So that's, you know, kind of the reality of how you can use this data behind, not creepy data, because the customer agreed to see it. There's some really creepy things you can do with social data. And we have those, you know, all the time. We have those questions. But this is just a great use case of, you know, where we can make the customer happy. Now, nobody else can see what's happening on that Toyota Tacoma. They can know that Steve's speaking agreement, that he has his boat, and they could certainly be offering him an F-150 or something, but we can personalize that experience. We can say, hey Steve, you got a problem, we don't want you to wear out your brakes, we don't want you to have a wreck, we want you to continue to have fun, so buy these, go in, we can even maybe offer him a discount for getting in, and we can subliminally, you know, put these messages up on every web page he goes to, and then, you know, show him our brand new shiny truck when he comes in. When we looked at this, you know, this is everything in Toyota. We do this kind of analysis. We look and say, what's the value add? What's the partner? What do we think about this? And so you can see some of the risks that we showed up. One of the things that we're worried about is, you know, if we start really categorizing how people drive, you know, do we have an issue with the police coming in and saying, tell me how Mike drives? I don't know. You know, do we? Those are some of the risks that we have to look at and see. But, you know, basically, it kind of helps us look ahead and understand the relationships that we never did, because the relationships are really what tells us how people are using our product and what helps us, you know, I'll use, you know, I don't want to be Toyota looking out at you. I want to be you looking forward to Toyota and understanding. I want to understand what you're seeing in our brand and seeing the value you're seeing and seeing the issues you're seeing so we can address those on a more personal basis. So I'll end with this slide, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. All if you would as well. I thought, first of all, let me say again, thank you for coming and sharing your story, and Paul as well. And particularly timely, I thought. Woke up this morning early, actually got a tweet, and by the way, there's the dryer sheet back, pretty cool. And I was wondering if your phone was ringing off the hook this morning as well, and if we would actually see you. I thought GM might give you a call this morning, and wonder if you guys could lend an ear or give them a little help with the inquiry. And as Winston Churchill once said, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And I think that was your own experience a little bit at Toyota, as you described it, as I think we follow the story. Looking in the rearview mirror things were pretty good and pretty rosy, and there was definitely some dark clouds. So I think kicking it off with a question, and then Leslie's got hopefully some from our audience, and I know Megan's been gathering online. My question to you is, now that you're past that crisis, and given what you've learned, and Paul, similarly for you, what would you do now? The number one question I get from folks, I'm sure in this audience, and folks I've worked with over the years is, we know there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of capabilities, and like we have a hard time getting our business or our executives or our leadership to sort of follow it. So if you were not in crisis mode now and could really sort of advocate what you should do next, what your company should do next, what people should do next, what do you think that would be?
Well, I'll answer it from our perspective because we really felt like whack-a-moles there for a little bit because we had the whole, the recession came in, kind of affected sales a little bit, but as I said, the cash flow bunkers really was a great benefit to us. Then we had the recall, and then we had the tsunami, and then we had the subsequent earthquakes and the destruction of the supply chain. That told us something. If you look at the Toyota culture, great Toyota production system, great just-in-time manufacturing, a lot of wonderful things that are studied in college about Toyota. It grew up as it doesn't feel like a global company. It feels like a very regional company. So when the supply chain got hit and 500 different parts in the supply chain were completely wiped out, we couldn't, at a drop of a hat, tell you worldwide what vehicles that impacted. So it really taught us that we have to go back and we have to put a lot more work into creating bill of materials and creating this so we can really react to those. So I think that energy that we had to spin up to is going on, and now we're seeing more investment in, they've allowed us to go out and invest in the technologies, and they've really put a focus on, right now we're trying to understand how to best incentivize the cars. A great story, too, that we had last year, the Silverados came out with a $5,000 incentive on a big truck. And I'm not disparaging our business, but most of our car folks are this, that feels right. And they understand that that is right. And so I was in a meeting, and in that meeting, they were talking about, GM put the bar here, we've got to match that. We've got to match it, and we're not going to sell the 20,000 tonners that we thought. And we were actually doing some work with predictive analytics at that time, and we had a little diminutive data scientist sitting at the table, and she, had her hand kind of like this, and she was being dismissed by these big car guys. And, one guy said, very proudly popping his chest out, I think we can only put $3,700 on those trucks, and I think we'll still make the market. And it comes up again. And finally, I asked, I said, can we listen to what she has to say? She said, if you put $1,500 on those trucks, you will sell within about 5%, 21,000 cars. And no way, couldn't be done, right? They split the difference. So they went from 37, because it's a huge, you talk about going from $3,700 to $1,500 on 20,000 units, it's huge, right? They split the difference, and she came back the next week and told them how many we were going to sell without incentives, and it was going to meet our goal, and she was off by about 45 cars. So think of the millions and millions and millions of dollars that conversation saved. So that's where we're investing very heavily.
Right on. Show them the proof, right? And evaluate. So, Leslie, we have some questions from our audience.
Yeah, I think we'll take one from Yvonne. Okay.
Yvonne, let us know where you're from and what's your question.
Okay. Hi, my name is Yvonne Burkes. I'm from Mazda North American Operations, just here in the backyard. And thank you for sharing your story as far as Toyota. We're now just in, as far as our approach with using big data, and I know you talked a lot about unstructured data. So I was curious as far as how did you get your team at Toyota, I know you have an incentive here with quality issue, as far as getting the business involved to perform the self-services of using that unstructured data. How do you get that as far as that performance and to get the business involved?
Well, we were lucky in that the tool we partnered with was really kind of built on the search experience, the Web 2.0 experience. if you've gone on and used Amazon or if you've used Home Depot, you would actually use the technology. And so it actually bringing that kind of Google-like search experience to their desktop was refreshing. One of those queries, and we kind of paused over it, but if you looked at those charts, they were all in failures per 100. So every one of those charts were normalized. If you we couldn't talk to these guys and say, let's put one chart on the page to make it really snappy. We put 16 charts on a page. So we were running 32 queries every time that page loaded, and we were still loading that page in under 15 seconds against a huge amount of data. And by doing the failures per 100, we were able to normalize so we could show a Camry next to an IS-350, which had widely pushed sales. So I think just the ease of use got them into it. Right now, we're trying to do more around self-service analytics in the space. So we have some teams that are writing our algorithms, on the back end, and we have other teams that are creating drag and drop GUIs. I want to look at customer, I want to look at vehicle, and I want to actually do this kind of analysis. And by the way, here's some metadata around what that analysis is. So we're trying to make it easy on them.
Well, I remember you telling me a story, correct me if I get the details wrong here, that at one point, I think it was the warranty analysts wanted you to prove that the calculations coming out of this new tool were valid, and you somehow had to replicate some of them with old systems they already trusted in order to get them to believe that this new tool you're giving them was giving them good information.
Those queries took 13 minutes on average for one of those charts. And so we turned around and said, okay, you have 300 people on this at all times. You're saving 13 minutes of query, and we did the calculations, and the ROI was about 800,000 hours of reduced wait time a year. So you're right. And the testing of this, we stood it up in weeks. Literally within about 4 weeks, we had it up and running, and we tested it. We were talking to quality guys, right? We tested it for about 6 months before we trusted it.
But the thing that kills me about this is that the same thing happened to Galileo. It's a true story. So, Galileo's got a telescope, and then, people say, how do I know this? How do I know that what you see through there exists? Maybe because you look through this device, you see something. And so to deal with this problem, he did a whole bunch of observations around town. And he set up his telescope on the roof, look at something across town, go downstairs, walk across the street, get a coffee, keep going, and then go look at the thing. In order to validate that, no, the device is not creating illusions. It's actually showing what is real, but giving you a new way to look at it. This is not a technological problem. This is a philosophical problem. And so one of the tactics that we have seen in helping business people to think with data, to believe the data they get, is that you have to do two things. One, show them something that they did not know about the vehicles, about the customers, about the marketing campaign, and then show them how you got it. And you have to find people within the business who you can convert, who you can make data believers out of.
I would add one to that, and Megan, I think we have some online quick questions as well. I don't know if you guys have seen a similar deal over my career and with working a lot of different companies and customers. Once you get to that point, also putting the ability to query the data in the hands of what I call mere mortals or averages, once they sort of get that, seems to make a big difference as well, where they have the ability to sort of ask the questions that they care about. It starts off with salespeople. Did I meet my quota? And am I doing that? But if you can get that out of the ivory tower or into the proprietary tools and into the environment where they can actually sort of form and begin to feel comfortable with their own queries, then it seems to take off pretty significantly.
So let me add something to that. Really, our best effort is to just try to get out of the way. Right? So when we build these systems, and what helps drive adoption is the very fact that they don't need to engage me to do these pieces. They can do that themselves. And the offshoot from that is they start designing their own applications that they'd like to see. Right? Then we facilitate that by delivering that, and we step out of the way. So it's often a reminder that the business drives the profit, and IT is not profit center. Right? So back up and support the people that do make the profit.
But this also is a big shift in thinking. It's a shift from thinking about data as a record of what happened, versus data as raw material that you make data products with. I was talking with the head of GE's new analytics business up in the Valley, and he was saying that for decades, engines have been loaded with sensors. Jet engines we're talking about here. Jet engines on planes, loaded with sensors. And they're constantly checking the performance of the engine. Have been for decades. And what they're looking for is violation of the limits. There are performance limits on those engines. They're constantly constantly monitoring themselves, am I within tolerance? And that was the purpose of the data. To constantly run that test as the engine is flying until it fails, and then send an alert. But that was the idea of what the data was for. What he said is that the new idea they have is let's keep every one of those tests. Then let's use that accumulated data to make a new thing. Let's make now a service that will actually predict when will that engine need maintenance based on the fluctuations of its actual performance. Because engines that fly through, say, parts of the world where there's really bad pollution or where there's a lot of sand because it's mostly a desert, those engines have a completely different life than the engines that fly, there's same model, that fly even long-haul routes but through a different kind of atmosphere. So this is a new way of thinking. The data is not just a shadow of the real world. It is a real thing in and of itself from which you can make new products and new services and new ideas.
And putting that out into the world where different folks can tap into that and build services alike. Megan, other questions?
Yes. Marichelle Villapondo, I believe I'm saying that correctly, is asking, is data still valuable if not mined by formal processes and systems, i.e. surveys, focus groups? Can you acquire data on a budget?
You got that all into Twitter? I'm impressed.
140 characters or less.
That's pretty awesome. So our first official tweet question. So thank you very much for that. Where's our questioner here? There she is. Is that accurately represented? You guys want to take that? So can you kind of restate it again? Because I got to know. I'm still enthralled by our Twitter question and the number of characters.
Yes, I can. Is data still valuable if not mined by formal processes and systems, i.e. surveys and focus groups? Can you acquire data on a budget?
So we'll take the second first. The answer is yes. You absolutely can acquire data on a budget. One of the remarkable things is with the datafication of everything is that there's a lot of data that's made available by nonprofits and governmental agencies. As Mike mentioned, the NHTSA database is downloadable. The data is available for free. There also are lots of open source technologies. This is one of the amazing things about what's happened to computing in the last 10 years is that you have a lot of new technologies created around data management by companies that don't make money selling software. They make money selling services they create on top of these technologies. They have released those to the open source community. So there are lots of cost-effective ways to get started using data. But the other question, is data still useful if you don't run it through a whole bunch of highfalutin algorithms? The answer is yes, but the value is different. So one way to think about this is that there is think about it as data for deciding and data for doing. So data for deciding, this is where you're putting data in front of people, often to fight bias. The subconscious bias that they're not aware is working, but is constantly working every time we go to make a decision, to expand their understanding of the situation. And that can lead to people more often making choices that leave them better off or leave the company better off. There's a great book called Nudge that talks all about this, actually, and the architecture of data for decisions, for improving the likelihood of people to make decisions that leave them better off. Then you have data for doing. And this is where you're piping data into some algorithm that is going to act on the data. Perhaps it is just completely standardized and it takes the same action every time. That's one possibility. It may make a highly standardized process and very efficient. Another possibility is in this new realm of machine learning. where the data is informing an algorithm, enabling that algorithm to change its own behavior based on the efficacy of its results and how those change. So there are different ways to get the value from data. You don't always have to run it through a machine, but you do have to recognize what kind of value you're trying to get.
Leslie, trustee in the back there, we have some other questions. I see you guys preferred.
I think one of the things I'll come back to you guys on is all this data is in such different formats. And so as you go out and get this non-structured data from all these data, how do guys like you and others deal with the amalgamation of that stuff and sort of bringing it together in some way?
So let me add some pieces to what, and I think this kind of ties into the accumulation of data, right? So the valuation of data is really determined by the owner or the user of the data, right? The business, the user, or the analyst is, right? Data itself has no intrinsic value, other than it may have some type of potential. And when you bring intelligence out of that data, that's where the value is determined. And it's not really, so it's asserting rigor or process around things just brings in reassurance that the recipe is followed, right? So when we start thinking about big data, sometimes you have to twist or bend that thought of how do I organize this data to make sense? Because in this world, if you have a 30% hit rate on data analysis, you're doing really well, right? So you're looking, like I said earlier, for anomalies, right? So where's that value? That value depends on who's looking at it, right? It depends on the intelligence you draw from the data.
It's really, as a corporate IT, it's really hard to know where to put your money. It's funny, we've invested a lot of money into understanding social media, and you know how I checked the value of our system and showing we considered invested money, and we were looking at the Super Bowls and looking at the comments in the cinema coming out of the Super Bowl. You know how I checked that? I went online and saw what the Boston Globe or something, they were publishing it in real time. So I didn't have to spend any money.
You didn't spend money and
I got the same result.
as good of anecdotal, better data.
Question from here?
Hi. So I had a question about Speedy McGee. Not every yutz with a heavy boat is thoughtful enough to go online and say, look at me pulling my 5,000-pound boat with my 4,000-pound limit truck.
Most are.
So I was wondering, where in the process do you titrate between human intelligence, you have somebody looking at that picture saying, oh, that looks like a problem, versus analytical, purely machine-driven analysis? How do you balance and go back and forth between the two?
It's interesting.
Sorry, what's your name and company background?
Hi, I'm Val Nillen. I've emailed with you. I work at the Mirage School.
I know.
It's interesting because if somebody calls into a call center and says, my navigation system on my Lexus is broken, we can now take that and go and look at the telematics data and understand that customer needs education on how to use their nav system. Or we can go and see, that there is really truly a problem on that. So we can't go quickly yet. We can't turn it around in microseconds like we need to. And I think that's where you're going to see, data that creates data that comes in and scores the value of the customer. If Paul's been a Toyota customer for 20 years and he calls in and says, my brakes feel weird on the car, he has more value than someone that's never driven a Toyota. It's the very first one, right? So being able to take that data and suddenly come up and say, here's Paul we want to score Paul. We want to know that if Paul comes in and tells us he has a quality problem, that we need to listen to him a little bit louder, ear, a little bit keener ear than what we're listening to somebody else. And we've gone through and looked at how we do those correlations. But you're right, not everybody is doing it on social media. And quite honestly, we as a company are not forcing people. I know some companies are making people log in on Facebook. We're giving the option. But we're very, very nervous around customer privacy. So if you log in with your Facebook ID to Toyota.com, we do not store your customer ID. You now become that Facebook ID. So if we're doing any matching and merging, it's usually from a service visit, where we know you're in and where you called in and said, I have a particular problem with this car. That's really what we're working at, is how we do those correlations. And then how do we create that data so it's accessible to our call centers, to our warranty centers, to our service centers.
That was, I think, my kind of question. Do you think collectively, and maybe let's see if we've got another online question, but do we get to a tipping point here where customers begin to expect, there's enough of this out there that you should know some of this about me. Do I really have to go through and enter in, 15 menus on the phone call and then, my customer ID and my VIN number and all this sort of stuff? Are you guys doing work collectively? Are you seeing companies, Paul, do cool stuff to bring this stuff together so you actually really can identify and engage with that customer? It feels like today we're in the stage where a lot of data is being gathered, maybe NSA or whoever, but it's not really being turned around yet as a value for most of us.
Absolutely, the expectation of how a company will behave with you individually has changed. We now frequently expect companies, the representative of the company we're dealing with, to have access to whatever information we would like them to have. And this is the tricky thing. So the whole debate that we're starting to have now around security and privacy is really, really critical. It's really critical because privacy is at one of the bedrock pieces of Enlightenment thinking that led to the kinds of governments that, the representative governments that we have in the West. A lot of our structures of how governments interact with people and interact with companies rest on, in part, the belief that people have a right to privacy in some form. Well, the curious thing about that, though, is that even at that time, people interacted in the public world. What's happening now is that our interactions as people with the public world, they leave a trail that they didn't leave before. We have this kind of transparency of the commons that we didn't have before. It's unclear what the right way is for companies to act in that environment. It's not clear the right way for governments to act, and we need to have a very active debate and conversation to figure that out. But I would venture to guess that everyone in here has had an experience where you get passed from one call center rep to another, and the rep says, "Okay, could you tell me your account number again, please?" And you're like, "You've got to be joking. Like, we put a man on the moon, and I can find out the air quality in China with an app on my phone, and you can't know my account number from one person to the next." It's absurd. So we have these moving targets about what data we expect to be passed on and what data we expect not to, but it's still being figured out.
We're getting close to our time, and I want to open it up and have us enjoy outside. Let's take another online question, and then I'll kind of wrap it up with you guys, and then we'll move it out here.
Yeah, perfect. I have a question from Mike in the audience for Mike and Mark.
Mike, go on down. You're the next contestant. Hey.
Yep, I'm GS Diamond. He has a few great questions, but one of them is, what did you accomplish in that first 50 hours of the crisis to convince leadership to invest?
It was more about just showing that we could actually take. There was no silver bullet to be found. It was really just saying, hey, we were getting calls left and right. I mean, as these bring out the best and worst in kind of the way we operate as a society. And every time somebody gets an attorney, they're asking for, give us the whole set of your data. We don't understand all of your call center. We want to send all of this. We want to see all your emails. And so, when you download every email that you have and send it off, there's kind of a, what did you send, And so basically we're just being able to show kind of, the real thing that was a seller was actually being able to create, we didn't show on that one slide, but be able to create text tag clouds so that we could very quickly focus in. That was great when we launched the Intune system. We were able to see that our call center, people just did not understand how to use our telematics systems and our apps. It was very evident when you looked in. If you read through, you would have to read through 8,000 call centers to understand exactly what they were saying. But with text tag clouds, unstructured data that you turn into a structured piece that you can use, you can quickly see in Intune apps, you can quickly see the exact problems that were happening. So I think really what sold it was being able to go into NHTSA database and show, our management, we're not being treated as equal citizens. Showing that we had 1,000 Priuses that had grown into 80,000 claims, whereas other manufacturers weren't having that. So it painted a very disparate picture. You guys can go download that database and see exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm going to finish it with this question and then wrap up and encourage you all to obviously continue to follow us, give us your surveys and your feedback here. But from each of you, and again, I want to thank you for spending the time and frankly being candid. And when we first discussed about this, I wasn't sure there were certain topics that we're going to be able to talk about, and I think that's been really good. And frankly, some of the greatest insights come out of these critical moments. So for many years, I think many of us have this experience. You're always like, I think several of you have kids and going through college. You've made a now interesting career of being in big data and analytics. How do you view this, and is this the future? As this crowd thinks about we're in a world of education right here, is this where they should double down and spend their time, and or is this where you would advocate to your kids or family that this is the career of the future, and has it been rewarding to you? Paul?
Yes. Yes, and yes. The reason I love big data is because of James Joyce.
James Joyce?
It's a short story, I promise. So in Ulysses, Joyce gives us this whole tableau of literary illusions that all then are part of one single day. And so you find out that the world is connected. But it's not true that everything's connected to everything else. Everything's connected to something. It's really hard to figure out exactly what. The connections are really, really sparse. That is what happens when you're trying to figure out why do the pins stick on the dash of was it roller?
It's
Camry. Of a Camry. The world is connected, but sparsely, and it's really difficult to figure out how when you need to know. The datafication of everything promises to help us decide and do things better in a very sparsely connected world like that. The practice of datafying the world and using data in that new way this is a grand experiment. I mean, we're at the beginning, like we were at the beginning of the early days of commercial electricity in the late 1800s. That's where we are now. So yes, it's a huge future. And yes, I actually do tell my children this, and they roll their eyes.
That's what kids do. Rick, what's your thoughts?
Well, I've spent the better part of my career integrating software and hardware, sometimes both. And for me, it's the process and the puzzle, right? So to be able to integrate something to enable a solution to a puzzle, that's what I find enjoyable, and I try to transfer that passion to my kids, right? Whether it be in an IS role or it's something else that they choose to do, it's where do you find satisfaction, which is important.
Mike?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, I think anybody who has, a small child, or in my case, a grandchild that is operating an iPad at a year old and going to their apps and turning it on and seeing the colors and playing with it, you understand it's a different generation. I don't know, who owns a BMW in the crowd? Somebody has to, a lot of people, right? So you're not the right demographics is what I was going to say, but I would say that, if you carry your BMW for service, they know who you are when you walk up, right? There's an RFID in your key, and as soon as you come to that dealership, they understand who you are, they greet you by name, and say welcome, and get you in. The average age of a Toyota driver is still late 40s. We're kind of worried that maybe that demographic isn't going to be too keen on that. We could do it, but we're kind of worried it's not going to be too keen. Where the BMW, it's expected, and I applaud those that aren't scared of it, but it's going to become part of our life. It's nothing we can change. And I look out, and I'm sure everyone sitting in the audience that has a data background, that's studying data, that's looking to this field of data science. I'm not a data scientist. I wish I was. If I was in college right now, that's what I'd be doing. Right? I hire smart people. But everyone out there that's doing it, you've got an incredible future in front of you.
I couldn't agree more. I say it, and we talk about it in the Edge class. If you're not a quant, get to know a quant. But you really don't have to be anymore. I think just an intellectual curiosity, it is a big data, big world out there, and I definitely think that you guys have selected at least a great topic to be interested in. We thank you for joining. Thank you very much to our guests. Nice round of applause. Thank you.